Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you very much. Adam.
So we are members of Promontory Point Conservancy. The Conservancy is a 501c3 nonprofit. We are 25 years old. Roughly, the movement to save Promontory Point started in January of 2000, but we'll be talking about that.
Back when some of us were much younger, by the way.
So I don't know how many of you have been to Promontory Point, but if you haven't, I hope you are enticed to go. It's a pretty amazing place. It's a gem in the city. We're going to be talking tonight about the Conservancy's work to preserve and protect Promontory Point. And we just released our third set of engineering reports in 25 years that show that preservation meets shoreline and storm damage and shoreline protection requirements of the city and the Corps. So when we can go through that as we're going to do a pretty high level gloss, but we're available to ask questions and we'll hang around for a breakout if there's more detailed questions. So Promontory Point extends from East 54th Street to East 56th Street, from South Shore to the water. It's a man-made peninsula. It was built in the late 1920s. In the late 1930s, what was the Chicago Park District turned it into a park. It's 40 acres. It's the southernmost point of Burnham Park, a large regional park that extends from Northerly Island all the way to the end of the point. We're going to be talking about the 3,150 linear feet of limestone block revetment that's along the edge of it. So Promontory Point has the last intact stretch of the historic limestone breakwater block, stepstone revetment and promenade that used to be along the entire Chicago lakefront. It was a WPA project in the 1920s and 30s. This is the last stretch. There's some tumble down parts at La Rabida on the south side and also at Morgan Shoal that are also endangered. But the point maintains its historic significance and integrity. So some definitions. What is a revetment? A revetment is a very special kind of seawall, and it's built in a way that it absorbs the wave energy as the waves coming across Lake Michigan, in this case, hit the peninsula. The stepstone shape of the revetment actually absorbs the wave energy and dissipates it, so it protects the land. It's not a retaining wall. That has another definition. We're looking at a picture on the left of the Ellis Island historic seawall that was repaired and rehabilitated by the National Park Service. It's not a revetment in its shape, but it is a historic seawall, and it shows that engineering exists to be able to take care of these historic stone structures. I happen to think that Chicago's quite as handsome as Manhattan in this picture. So what is preservation? I pulled this quote out of a book by Cedric Johnson about the civil rights, the origins of the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 1960s. But it occurred to me that the things that were driving the civil rights movement also drive the beginnings of the preservation movement in the United States and result in the 1965 National Historic Preservation Act. So this act has federal regulations. They're still intact as of this moment. And the Secretary of the Interior is responsible for the regulations for the National Historic Preservation Act. And there are 4 treatment standards for historic properties. We're going to be looking at one of them, which is rehabilitation. Each of these 4 has about 10 to 15 what are called standards that define what it means to preserve, restore, rehabilitate, or reconstruct a historic property. So Promontory Point is double landmarked, thanks to Jack Spicer here. There was a crusade by the community to get it on the National Register listing of historic places. The community raised the money to write the nomination report, and with the help of then Alderman Leslie Harrison, we managed to get it through all of the hurdle steps. And then again, the community raised the money to write the Chicago, to hire someone to write the Chicago Landmark Designation Report. And the community, this was a political fight. The community wrote almost 600 letters to the Commission on Chicago Landmarks that saw it through the landmark process. So it's landmarked now per a ordinance, a city council ordinance. The landmark designations do not protect the historic features of Promontory Point. It just slows down the process um, as we'll see, of reconstructing them or destroying them. But they are good things to have in place, and it does give us a legal framework to work from. So these were things that the community did to protect the point as part of the Save the Point movement, which, as I said, started in January of 2000. There was a first initiative from 2000 to 2007, and then it sort of just stopped for a while. It turned out in 2014, the city, the Chicago Park District, and the Chicago Army Corps resurrected their plans for demolition and replacement with new construction at the point. And we didn't find out about it right away. But when we did, when we started getting wind of it, we started getting leaks and rumors from people in the city. This is a press story. We started organizing again and raising money to save the point. So through FOIA and through leaks that we've gotten from the city, we know that CDOT, the Park District, and the Chicago Army Corps intend to demolish the historic limestone revetment at the point and replace it with a concrete structure with limestone cladding on it. So they seem to think that we won't know the difference between the real thing and something with a limestone veneer. So their intention is to replace the existing historic structure with a new structure. Technically, that's illegal because of the landmark protections. It's called illegal foreclosure. They have to go through what's called a Section 106 process as part of the preservation requirements to collect public input and to work with the community to develop a design, and they have to work with the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation in Washington, D.C., and then the State Historic Preservation Office to preserve the historic elements. So they're backing into replacement, demolition and replacement. So as a result, we go about organizing the community, and we raised this round about $350,000 to hire our own coastal and structural engineers to take a look. We had two questions. What is the condition of the revetment at Promontory Point? Is it beyond preservation and repair? And if not, what kind of engineering methods are available that would also meet the Corps' requirements for storm damage and shoreline protection? We were really lucky to find McLaurin Engineering out of New York. We found them through that Ellis Island project that the National Park Service was doing. They have worked on every inch of Manhattan Island, including FDR Drive and Riverside Park, which means when they've worked either for the Army Corps or with the Army Corps, the Corps has responsibility for all shoreline and gets the permits for any construction. They are also a preferred contractor for the Army Corps' Marine Design Center out of Philadelphia. So they come really comfortable working with the Corps. Their their engineers are also divers. So what they did was a drone aerial survey of the limestone revetment, and then their divers did below water photography, and they created a three-dimensional cloud above water and below water of the entire revetment. We were in the process, we were also approached by Wis Jenny Elsner Associates. They are one of the premier coastal and structural engineering firms in the country, just very well respected for their integrity and their high caliber work. So we were very fortunate to be able to work with these two companies. Most of the money that we raised came from the community. We did get a grant from the Driehaus Foundation, from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and from Landmarks Illinois to complete the 4 studies that we're going to talk about. So the 4 studies are a historic structures report. This is something that actually the Army Corps ought to have done back when the Chicago Shoreline Project started in the 1980s. This is the first historic structures report that's been done for this project. McLaurin did a condition study, a coastal vulnerability analysis, and then an alternatives design study. So the Historic Structures Report by WJE, it's a pretty important document for historic properties. It's required by the Secretary of the Interior regulations. It serves as a master plan for design and construction planning and decision making. It determines what the SOI treatment standards going to be, and it does a condition study of the features and then determines their history, their significance, their integrity, and those things guide decisions about how to go about treating the historic structure. What WJE found is that, well, we'll see, but in this case, they were also acting as a peer review for McLaurin's studies. So WJE found that the historic structure is in good shape, that it functions, it can be retained and repaired, which was corroborating McLaurin's findings, and that rehabilitation is the most appropriate Secretary of the Interior treatment, that it can be repaired, it can be fixed, while maintaining its historic significance and its cultural values. So it also confirmed that the condition, that the revetment has not failed, that it functions right now for the purpose of storm damage and shoreline protection, and that the problem is the loss of subgrade material for the promenade platform and inadequate drainage in the parkland. So we'll be looking at those in the McLaurin reports. So McLaurin's condition study found that, in fact, the revetment has not failed. It's functioning. It's serving its purpose of protecting the land, in this case, the park, from the waves of Lake Michigan, that it can be retained and repaired, and that if repaired and maintained has another 100 years of service. So this revetment was, this park was completed in 1939, so the revetment is 86 years old. It's had, except for one area on the east end, it's had no maintenance over that period, so little to no maintenance. What you see in the map here is McLaurin found that there were 6 distinct sections, each with their own condition. And if you notice on the right side of the map, the light orange, that's 1,300 linear feet. So almost half of the point that's in really good shape. That south portion of the point does not get hit by storms. That those storms hit the east and the northeast section of the point, and the repairs there are pretty minimal and therefore cost effective. So the condition study found that there were 6 historic elements for the limestone structure. There's the upland parkland, the stepstone revetment. So the stepstone part, in some places is 3 steps and in some 5. The limestone promenade, which is the platform portion, and underneath that you have the promenade subgrade. So this was, Chicago was actually a pioneer in lakefront structures for cities in the United States in the 20s and 30s with this design. So the crib structure was how it was historically built. And then last is the tow scour protection. So that's the part that's actually in the lake that's protecting the edge, the outer edge of the revetment from waves, and it has an important function. So McLaurin's study found that the limestone revetment has not failed. There's no failure of the structure. There's two problems. There's lack of inadequate parkland drainage. So when water pools in the park, it doesn't have a route to get back into the lake, and it's eroding down through the underpinnings of the revetment itself. And then that the subgrade material under the promenade has been washed out by waves, most particularly on the north edge of the point. McLaurin also did, their coastal engineers, not their structural engineers, did a coastal vulnerability analysis. They took the criteria that are publicly available from the Army Corps. Through FOIA, we were able to get what the Chicago Department of Transportation, CDOT, used for its RFP for its engineering company. They've already hired engineers to an engineering firm to do a $5 million design study of Promontory Point. We were able to FOIA that, and we provided those criteria to our engineers. McLaurin has a lot of experience working on waterfront structures, so they included additional engineering standards and practices. They evaluated the structure based on a standard set of criteria and wave design. What you see on the right is one of the simulated tests that they ran. So this is, so the Corps and CDOT are using an extreme non-historic wave of 7.3 above average. McLaurin used a 8.1 wave. So what you see is that the existing limestone revetment right now with an 8.1 foot above average water level wave is hitting just slightly above the second tier of the steps. It is not overtopping the structure. So the water that's actually pooling in the parkland is because of the storm winds that blow the splash from the waves up onto the land. And then that water gets trapped there because of the inadequate drainage. So this was an important part of the study because out of this come the alternative designs that McLaurin proposes for fixing the revetment. The coastal vulnerability analysis finds that the revetment right now meets storm damage and shoreline protection requirements just fine. It's resilient and performing. It's stable and durable under extreme design wave criteria. And that erosion is not the evidence of overall failure of the limestone block structure. So using those findings in the condition study, McLaurin went on to do an alternative design study. So what they did was, because of the different sections with different conditions, they came up with 5 different possible preservation alternatives that preserve the historic character of the limestone revetment and met the Army Corps and CDOT's requirements for coastal resilience. So we're not peddling a competitive plan to their demolition and replacement with new construction. We are showing that there are multiple ways that the limestone revetment can cost effectively be fixed. And what the table shows is that for different alternatives, they apply to different sections. So in that map with the little different colored sections. So if you see section 1, which is 1,300 linear feet, so almost half of the point. You can see that there are very cost-effective ways of repairing that. A cost per linear foot as low as $13,700, whereas the core CDOT cost per linear foot is $31,746. So that's a one-size-fits-all solution, and it's extremely expensive. So there are not only multiple ways to go about fixing it, there are completely economical ways that make fixing it about 50 to 60% of the cost of demolition and new construction. The alternative design study also found that if you repair it in sections, it'll take 11 months. This makes a lot of sense. To demolish it, you have to pull the whole thing apart. In the past, what they've done is they've ground these 8,000-pound blocks into rubble, and then they truck the rubble out. Um, so that's a huge cost and a huge time commitment, but then they have to build a new structure out of concrete and whatever else they're going to do with limestone cladding. All of the materials to repair it are already in place at the point, so you don't have any of these time-consuming activities, and you don't have the cost. So repairing it will take 11 months and keeps as much as 80% of the park open to the public at any one time, whereas the core CDOT plan closes the park for 5 years, the whole park for 5 years. So these multiple options can also be adapted for universal access or ADA compliance. Our alternative designs include universal access designs at 3 locations. We worked with Frank Heitzman, who wrote the state ADA guidelines. He's a historic architect. And Frank worked with McLaurin to come up with these universal access designs using a 1-inch per 20-inch distance, so a very gentle ramp that would work for everybody. So it would work for people in wheelchairs, but it would also work for kids and people with strollers. McLaurin completed a cost-benefit analysis that showed that using preservation alternatives, it's significantly cheaper, 50 to 60% less, and the same for maintenance. The maintenance for the lifespan of a concrete revetment is 40 years. So we're looking at 86 years right now, and McLaurin's saying that if you repaired it and you put in some of these new materials, you could get another 100 years durability out of it. So I really like this photo. This is from 1938, 39, but if you notice along the edge of the water, there's these little tiny cranes, and they're positioning the limestone blocks into the limestone structure. And these little cranes are still available for exactly this purpose, for repairing the revetment. They do not, the Corps has told us that their plan would mean that they would be clear cutting all of the trees at the point around the edge and most of the meadow for staging. This would have very little damage for the landscape design, which is also part of the landmark designation. It just goes to show that fixing the revetment, as McLaurin said, isn't too much different than repairing the flagstone patio in your backyard. This is not complicated engineering. So let's look at some of the elements and some of the technology and repairs that McLaurin and Wisjeni WJE looked at. So for the Parkland Upland, on the left, you can see this is the east end at the Coffins. This is where erosion, water has, the spray from waves has overtopped the revetment. and has pooled, and as it's drained out back into Lake Michigan, it's taken out the earthen backfill. So McLaurin is proposing using marine mattresses that would help with the drainage, putting in geotextiles that would allow the water to drain back out into Lake Michigan without destroying the underpinnings of the structure. These are pretty tried and true um, materials that are now being used all over the world for lakefront structures. Apparently, these have been really successful at the Panama Canal. So here we're looking at the far north end of Promontory Point. Sometime in the 1980s, the Corps and the city put rubble mound on top of the revetment there. The structure is still intact there, so these stones just need to be removed and the revetment repaired. But in this case, we're looking at the step stones, so they just need to be reset. And where there's erosion damage from the overtopping spray, put in new fill and the geotextiles. This is a look at where the north end of the point meets the concrete coffins on the east end. So we're not sure if the joining of the two materials is what exacerbates the damage here, but this is an instance where waves over time have washed out the fill underneath the promenade and the blocks have settled. There's no damage to people from this. It's not overtop. These blocks are not being, uplifted or overturned by waves. It's just that as the material beneath them has been washed out, they've just settled. So here's a more high cost option with these caissons underneath the promenade. They're like giant cinder blocks and filled with rubble. It just adds more stability, more durability over time. Another tried and true, pretty common lakefront technique for structures like this. The promenade itself, so here we're looking at the south end of the point. All that needs to happen here is the new fill, new gravel needs to be put in, packed in underneath the promenade, and the stones reset. Pretty economical, not very expensive in the scheme of things. So the timber cribbing is part of the historic structure also, has the historic significance because of the fact that Chicago was really a pioneering waterfront city, and this was a really successful design copied by other cities. So the crib really no longer serves a function. It stopped serving a function once the revetment itself was built, but there's no reason to destroy the whole thing just to remove the crib structure. In fact, it could be used for other strengthening things if there was budget for it. So in this case, the timber cribbing has a concrete cap on it at the water facing edge to just reinforce that edge that's upholding the outer stone on the promenade. You could also, the timber cribbing is on a steel structure that's still intact and still there, so you could roll a steel sheet piling along it. It could be used structurally quite easily in any repair. So toe scour protection turns out to be probably the thing that's eroded the most over time. It's just that it's not very visible because it's under the water. It plays a really significant role in mitigating wave energy and dissipating wave energy before it hits the land. So the shape of it is important. Here you see a couple of options that would work to really reinforce and keep that fill stable underneath the promenade while breaking the force of the waves. As I mentioned, the Secretary of the Interior standards of rehabilitation allows for adaptation for universal access. This is a drawing of the north end of Promontory Point, where the limestone revetment connects with a concrete revetment that the city built back in 1999. So getting people up and down easily to the waterfront and into the water is the goal here. And here's some other conceptual drawings at other places. Here you see the on the east end on the left, what are called the coffins. So in 1964, the Park District threw all the blocks that were making up the limestone promenade into the water. They're still there. They make up an inventory that could be used for rehabilitation and repair. And they poured this immense concrete slab. It's over 5 feet thick. It's stable. It's not going anywhere. It has an erosion cavity that can easily be filled. It would be astronomical to destroy it and just dismantle it. It's a concrete platform, so why not just put ADA ramps down to it so that people in wheelchairs can get down to the water and get down into the water. So taking advantage of what's already there, what's part of the community culture. I mean, just the fact that everybody knows it as the coffins. They're not coffins, they're wave deflectors, these little block things on there. So our studies in conclusion show that the existing limestone block structure has not failed. It functions in good condition right now for the purposes that it was intended, coastal resilience. It can be retained, repaired, and rehabilitated per the preservation standards. And it can be retained, repaired, and rehabilitated to meet the Army Corps and CDOT requirements for storm damage and shoreline protection. There's at least 5 ways that we know of that can be fixed, and there could be even more. The point being that there's a array of ways that it can be fixed rather than destroyed. And that if the cost is 50 to 60% less than the one-size-fits-all demolition and replacement, and that maintaining it is also less than new construction. So our approach is the only one to date that actually marries storm damage and shoreline protection requirements and the Secretary of the Interior preservation standards. In addition, it's cheaper. And plus, it's what the community overwhelmingly wants. So right now we're running a survey. You have to be at the point to take the survey, but the results are pretty amazing. And one of them shows that 99.7% of the community thinks the revetment should be retained and repaired. So we've had very close to 500 responses already. So we're statistically valid so far. So you don't see that kind of unanimity in our society very often, but it's clear that the people who go to the point all year long really love it. And it's part of their life, it's part of their mental health, their physical health, it's part of their community. It's a really extraordinarily unique place. I think it represents a lot of what we say we want to be in terms of inclusion and safety, beauty and peacefulness. So preserving the historic limestone block structure also preserves the community that's gathered at the point for nearly 100 years. And that's our presentation. We're happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
And thank you. Much appreciated. We do have some questions for you.
Great.
I'll read a few of these here. How does the Promontory Point compare to other similar landmarks in Chicago? Has this been an issue anywhere else, or has this been an issue in any other cities?
Oh,
Within the landmarks ordinance, there's always a provision that if a landmark building becomes dangerous to public health or public safety, it can go ahead and be demolished. And we fear that that's what the city will contend about the point at some point that it needs to be demolished because it's a public safety hazard, which is not true.
Well, but the lily pool, talk about, that's a,
And that's another example. If you've ever been to the lily pool at Fullerton Avenue in the lake, that was also designed by Alfred Caldwell, who designed the plantings at Promontory Point. That was a really rigorous exercise on the part of the park district to include the community and please them and respond to them and take care of that community that was familiar with there. And this has not gone on the south side with the Promontory Point.
yeah, the lily pool is a good example of a collaborative design between the agencies and
It's
the
also
community.
it's also a Chicago landmark.
Yeah, and if you've been there, you know that they made changes for ADA compliance, but it's completely within the spirit of Caldwell's design.
It proves that park district can do really beautiful work when they want to.
Interesting. Okay. What what's the motivation to make repairs like what the Corps has in mind?
Nobody knows. We think it's to spend as much money as possible. But it's also just jurisdiction. It's their turf. They want to do it their way. This is something they've done over and over and over again up and down the lakefront, and they're confident and comfortable with it. They're overestimating the difficulties of preservation and rehabilitation, and they're just stubborn.
Yeah,
Well,
they know
you
how to do concrete. You can see it on the rest of the lakefront. The rest of the lakefront used to look like Promontory Point. It used to be these large limestone breakwater blocks.
well, you had mentioned the again the McLaren's condition studies. What's the reception been to those?
The Corps tells us that they don't have money to read them, so they're not
To
even.
read them.
They don't even have. They're not funded to read
They're
them.
not funded to read them. So
But we've delivered them to the offices of every elected official in the area and to the park district, and to the brand new CEO at the superintendent at the park district, who's very, very, very prone towards preservation and really feels that this is an important issue as well. So we think that those engineering reports are really important because they're definitive. If anybody reads them, they'll realize how valuable they are and how true they are.
we also have gotten those reports to the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation in Washington, D.C. So they're the federal agency that oversees the Secretary of the Interior processes, and also to the State Historic Preservation Office. So these things are now on the record.
Everybody has them.
Got it. Okay.
You can too.
Well, in the beginning, in the presentation, you mentioned national and local historic designations. There's a question here from the audience. Can you talk about the value of obtaining both designations instead of one or the other?
Well, the National Register gives it standing with the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation in DC. So that was really important. It doesn't give physical protection, it doesn't prevent demolition, but it heightens its importance and its visibility to people. And the Chicago designation is really important, and it really does forbid demolition except under extreme conditions.
Hmm,
So what we're
okay.
hoping, and what the superintendent for the park district has said quite recently is, hey, I'm not worried, it's landmark, we're gonna save it. Now, he doesn't really know what might be motivating CDOT and the Army Corps, but he's standing for preservation, and he sees the landmarking, the Chicago landmarking is very, very important.
So the Chicago landmark has more steps that have to happen for them to get a permit for a demolition. And it has to ultimately go back to the city council to have the ordinance changed. So it's
Did,
just, it slows things down, but it also gives it a more solid protection.
well, on that point, did you get any input or follow-up from the team that worked with the Army Corps of Engineers or CDOT?
We meet with them. We're in the process of negotiating a programmatic agreement for the project. So we meet with them. They're willing to acknowledge our reports, but they're saying that they're off the record and they won't be used for any decision making. So we're trying to build that into the programmatic agreement for the project.
Got it. Let's shift focus for a second. Regarding rehabilitation for universal access and ADA compliance, is the point currently not meeting the ADA compliance standards?
Oh, no, no, not at all. It's very difficult to get up and down it for people like me. So this will be a very, very welcome thing.
So the community has built its own sets of steps. So if you come if you come to the point, there are a couple places where it's painted with orange neon paint to show you where they've added blocks so that
So,
there's smaller steps rather than the 4-foot drop on the blocks. There's
Mhm.
smaller steps to get down to the promenade. So the community does a lot of maintenance and care for the point, and this is part of it. There's also the community also has put in ladders for getting in and out of the water, particularly on the south side for the deep water swimmers. People have been swimming from the end of the point since it was first landfilled in the 1920s, so almost 100 years of deep water swimming. But people also deep water swim from the north side also.
You had, Jack, you had mentioned that it's personal for you. It, let's get a little personal. Tell us a little bit about yourselves. How did you get involved with this issue in Promontory Point Conservancy?
I had just come back from Paris, France on the Millennium, where there were 1 million people in the streets on the last day of the year. And I came back to Chicago in January of that year. And there was the very first public meeting about what the Park District wanted to do. Uh, and it was very raucous. The community members were not happy with the idea of the concrete and the demolition. So a bunch of us got together and decided we would try to work with the alderman, who was very supportive of preservation. That was 25 years ago, and it's gone up and down and in and out and around in circles ever since. Um,
Amazing.
but go ahead.
Okay, I was just saying that's amazing.
Everybody has at least one point story. That's part of the fun of talking to people. So
It's a wonderful community. I mean, it's really
yeah,
diverse, both in terms of age and race. And when people come from all
economic
over the
class.
city, and
Yeah.
everybody says they feel comfortable and safe and happy there. It's a very unique kind of environment. It also sort of destigmatizes the South Side. Everybody thinks the South Side is
Right.
full of danger and murderers, etc. My sister, who lives in Vermont, will not come to visit me because of all the crap she's heard about the South Side of Chicago. Um, and if you go to the point, you realize that's not who we are on the South Side.
Yeah,
I know
you
so many
see who we
couples who
really are.
I know so many couples who've gotten engaged there. It's
We
always
had we
somebody's
had
family story.
we had our first kiss there. So
Yeah, this is a late life
Oh.
romance, but that's a pretty common story, actually. People who got engaged there, people who had their first date there, people who, yeah, all kinds and every kind of couple. So, yeah, the survey that we're running that you can take only at the point, one of the questions is, do you feel safe at the point? And 99.3% um, of the people said yes. And that's a pretty astonishing statistic that, you know, almost 500 people go there because it's peaceful and safe. Um, it's really a extraordinary place, you know, and it's not like, and you find every kind of gathering there from church groups and prayer meetings and you know, and then people are there by themselves meditating or doing their own thing, but then there's family reunions and there people have wonderful gatherings at the council rings with the fire pits. I mean, technically the park district tells us you're not allowed to have a fire in the fire pits, but nobody pays any attention. They're absolutely wonderful. And people are out there in the dead of winter with a fire on the fire
and the
pits.
park district says you can't swim at the point, and on a good summer day, you'll see 70 or 80 people in the water at just one time.
Amazing. Amazing. When I was a kid, that's where uh Yom Kippur we would cast our sins into the water from there. You see a lot of people doing that.
Yep.
Uh, you got people interested, you got people excited. Question here, how can we get two questions I'll combine into one. How can we get more involved? And are there any vital deadlines coming up on which action needs to be taken? So it's a good sign that you're getting that question.
Great, that's a great question. Yeah, the best thing to do is go to promontorypoint.org and scroll down and get on our mail list. And because of the Secretary of the Interior process requirements, the Army Corps and the city will have to hold community meetings. And it's really important that people show up at these meetings and speak out. So,
They will ask you whether you want pink concrete or blue concrete, and you say no concrete.
right.
There you go.
So, yeah, fix it, don't destroy it. So we need people who understand that there are real cost-effective ways to fix it. And we need them to show up and speak up. We also do letter writing campaigns. So that's how we got the Chicago landmark designation. We just bombarded them to the point that they couldn't ignore us. But we're just about ready, I think, to try to get to the mayor. So a letter writing campaign, we use something like Action Network. You can customize your own letter. Most people do. They write their own point stories. But there's a form email that you can send. So we do those kinds of action events. Those will be coming up. I can't give you specific dates. I mean, just go to the Point all summer and enjoy it. It's a great place to be
Exactly.
for a picnic, whatever your gathering is, whatever your meetup is. It's a fun place.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you heard them, folks. Promontorypoint.org. Keep in touch with what they're doing and what the next steps are. Debra Hammond, Jack Spicer, thank you so much for being part of Shy Hack Night. I hope that this was fun for you. I know it was really, really informative for us. And at this point, I am going to turn things over to my dear